There is no tool and there are no tactics and there are no playbooks that are going to work well for you if your mindset is fundamentally selfish and if your mindset is fundamentally about taking and not giving. Conversely, when you help people and you help entire teams to reset that mindset, everything else starts to fall into place really nicely.
This is Brand Story, a podcast featuring in-depth conversations with leaders, marketers, and brand storytellers about their professional journey and the impact they are making on the world around them. Welcome to the Brand Story podcast. I'm your host, Steve Gilman, and my guest today is Steve Watt. Steve is an accomplished marketer, a sales leader, and a subject matter expert in social selling, and is currently the director of market insights at Seismic. Hi, Steve. Welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here, Steve. I appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I think we'll have a blast. So I met you by following you on LinkedIn and enjoying your content. You have amazing content on LinkedIn, and it's thoughtful, it's educational, and you talk a lot about social selling and also about how to use LinkedIn. So I've heard you say that LinkedIn is a better tool for farming than it is for hunting. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I believe that we're in the very early days of really social selling, social reputation building, social business in so many ways on LinkedIn, and that there's a lot of baggage about what people were kind of taught to do. And in fairness, what kind of worked for a while in the past? Like people used to look at LinkedIn as like the world's largest Rolodex, right? Just like everyone's there. Time for me to go eat, right? It's like the oasis in the desert, and like all the animals are coming to get a drink, and I'm the lion, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to eat well. But nobody wants to be your next meal, right? Nobody wants to be hunted, and that kind of connect and pitch slap approach to LinkedIn, just blast out connection requests, immediately hit people up with a request for a meeting. This sort of thing maybe kind of sort of worked in the past. It does not work now. I mean, people are done with it. And the more senior they are, the more done they're with it. The more done they are with it because they've had it worst. I mean, I've talked to senior executives who get more than 100 outreaches like that a day. And they're just not responding to any of them. So that old barge into people's world and try to hunt them mindset is not serving you well on LinkedIn. You need a whole different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I love that point of view because I still get those, and it amazes me that people still do it. So I get pitch slapped every single day, and I never respond anymore. Besides every once in a while, I'll respond and say, hey, consider doing this differently. I don't know why I even bother. But I think that's a really important perspective. And you've talked a lot about why LinkedIn, there's kind of an old LinkedIn and a new LinkedIn. And this new LinkedIn is about sharing freely, which salespeople are, and really people in general, I think it came from the old world of sales, don't give anything away. That mindset really doesn't serve you well today, does it?
Not at all. Yeah. I say that there's three main differences between what I call old LinkedIn and today's new LinkedIn. And, first is that it's much more today about human voice, individual voice, as opposed to just the corporate voice. It used to be company pages and ads and job postings, and it was just the company. Now, those that are getting the largest audience, the greatest engagement, and the greatest impact on LinkedIn are individuals. So the move from corporate voice to human is one. The move from seeing it as a broadcast channel and instead seeing it as now a conversation channel, a two-way, a multi-way conversation channel. That's a second big change. And then the third thing, as you're saying, is that the nature of the content that is going to be more human, is going to spark conversations, and is going to serve you well, has got to be a lot less promotional than in the past. Now, if you show up with an honest intent to give it away, to educate, to inspire, to help others, then you become a magnet for the right people at the right times. And that is going to serve you so much better than just the old school approach of just promotion. Like, hey, we won an award. Like, hey, this is what we do. Hey, look at me, look at us. It's just when you flip it around and you become much more audience centric, much more buyer centric, and much more client centric, you just rise head and shoulders above the crowd.
Yeah, I think that's a trend that certainly on LinkedIn it's taken over, and people are still slow to the uptake. on that. People are like terrified to say anything personal when they're a business person. But whether you do B2B marketing or B2C marketing, people are people. If you're doing B2B marketing, the other person on the other end is a person with hopes and dreams and everything else. They're not a business robot.
People sometimes say to me, should I talk about business or should I talk about personal stuff? I say, well, what I do is I talk about business topics, but in a personal way. I talk about things with a personal voice, with an opinion, a perspective. And I don't write in a way that sounds like a press release or sounds like a polished PR statement. So I don't see it as people will sometimes say, oh, LinkedIn's becoming Facebook. I don't want to see selfies. I don't want to see a picture of what you had for breakfast, but that's a false dichotomy. It's not like robotically professional versus here's what I ate for breakfast. There's a massive area in between where you can talk about business topics in a human way. And for me, it serves me extremely well.
Man, well, you do it in such a great way. I love your content and I really enjoy it. And
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you put a lot of work into it and it's very natural. And I think that point of talking about business in a human way is really important. And I see people get bad, like negative feedback a little. They get way more positive when they talk about their lives. Sometimes, you have really talented business people and every once in a while they'll do a post about their life. How do you feel about that?
I think it's kind of funny. There's always someone, right?
Yeah, I know. Isn't there?
There's always please
troll.
everyone.
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to please everyone, you're going to be so outrageously vanilla, no one's ever going to notice you. But it does seem there's every week there's a post that blows up where someone shares something really vulnerable, really personal, and like 19 people say, "Oh, Steve, thank you for sharing that." That's and one person says, "This isn't Facebook, like that. This is a business platform." And
I hate that
5 years ago,
Yeah.
Nobody took that guy on. Now,
Yeah.
when that happens, that person gets jumped by everyone else who says, "Who are you who made you the self-appointed gatekeeper of LinkedIn? Like, stop, you don't like it, scroll on by." So now, I personally choose not, I don't talk about my kids. I don't really talk about my struggles. That's not the way I roll. Like I said, I tend to talk about business topics in an authentic human voice. That works for me. Other people, they want to be super vulnerable. They want to put it out. I say more power to you. And if you don't want to see it, well, scroll on by. You can also block people. You can disconnect from, I wrote a post, I don't know if you saw it just recently, where the headline was "Weed Your Garden." Pick out the weeds. If your feed is yours to maintain. Don't complain about people who use it differently than you. Just stop following them. If there's someone who, talks about their dog every day and you don't want to hear it, well, just stop following them or scroll on by. You don't get to gatekeep how they choose to use LinkedIn.
I think that's a great point. People have a ton of different personal brands. People have come from different backgrounds. There are people who it really works for them to be very personal. And then someone else does it slightly different. I love how you do your content. Other people, their content's super intellectual, but it still works for them. They're pretty far away from being personal. It's more about who you are, not about a right way to do it.
Yeah, who you are. And the other half of the equation is, who's your audience? Who are you trying to reach? If your intended audience is, creative professionals or owners of ad agencies, you're probably going to speak differently than if your intended audience is bankers. So it's who you are is half of it. Who your intended audience is the other half, and both of those variables are going to be a little bit different for all of us, and that's a good thing, because it would be really boring if we were all doing exactly the same thing. So I love it, and I love the much more human and authentic ethos, I guess, that it has really become much more common on LinkedIn. And that's why I started creating this idea of old LinkedIn versus new LinkedIn and talking about that a lot. And people say, well, when exactly did that happen? Like it wasn't a product release, right? It wasn't a day that now, oh,
It wasn't an update.
welcome to, yeah, it wasn't like, oh, look, there's a new font. It's new LinkedIn now. It's not that. It's an evolution, and it's taking place it's very unevenly distributed. And different people, different companies, different industries are seeing it or not seeing it in different ways. Some people have been in what I would consider a new LinkedIn mindset for several years now, and some people absolutely are not there yet, but that's okay.
I think there's a lot of opportunities for brands and a lot of opportunities for individuals. And I've seen you write about, the different mindset of how companies, organizations, and their teams approach LinkedIn, where there's like the official, like, here's our official company message, and then empowering individuals to go out on LinkedIn and represent the brand. So can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think what you write around that is so fascinating.
Yeah, I see it sort of as you could break it into either 3 or 4 different approaches, right? There's those that are just basically, let's call it 4. There's those companies that are just ignoring it. Like they're just not doing anything, but they're in a pretty small minority. Then sort of the stage 2 ones are the ones who say, well, our HR team will post job postings and our marketing team will run ads and they will run the organic company page too. And the rest, it doesn't concern the rest of you. Leave it to them, right? That's sort of the stage 2. And that was pretty mainstream a decade ago. I think the stage 3, you start getting into employee advocacy. And that's when you hear people talking about, like, we could extend our reach. It's a realization that your people collectively have a massive number of connections, far more than your company has followers. And then that starts getting people thinking, well, if everyone would just reshare our blog, if everyone would share that we won a Best Places to Work award.
Everyone's a broadcast channel.
Broadcast, right, exactly. If, like, we got a webinar next week, if everyone would share the registration page, wow, we'd crush our number, right? This is it's better in a sense than ignoring it entirely or telling people not to do it, but it's very robotic. It's not very empowering. I like to say that it's treating your people like Wi-Fi extenders, right? It's like, okay, we've got our central advertising voice over here, and if we could light up these few hundred or few thousand people as Wi-Fi extenders, wow, we'll get more eyes on our content. We'll get more people registering for our webinar. We'll get more, visits to our website. You're not empowering your people. You're not respecting your people. You're treating them as advertising robots. You're treating them as Wi-Fi extenders for your corporate voice. So that's third. And a lot of companies are stuck there. And, we could talk all day about why that doesn't work very well. But the next step, the kind of like the phase 4 is where you really start to empower and enable your people, not just to spread the corporate word, but to bring their own voice. And yeah, sure, go ahead and share some of our corporate content. That would be great. But also, what are you interested in? What are your customers and your prospects and your partners interested in? And how are you going to engage in conversations? And when you get to that 4th stage, that real empowerment and enablement, that's when you really start to unlock the power of LinkedIn.
Man, that's so beautifully put. And I hope a lot of people really take that to heart, because I see a lot of companies stuck in stage 2. And unfortunately, and then a few companies who are just, tinkering with stage 3, or they're in stage 3 and they're comfortable and that's it. But when you empower people to have a voice, business is about relationships. So the more you treat people who you work with respect, and then they're out interacting and treating others with respect, you build so much more goodwill.
It's incredibly powerful. I liken it to edge computing, right? If you look at the resource economy, you look at logistics and stuff like that, it used to be all processing power was at headquarters, and out in the field, it was basically blunt instruments, right? And in recent years, edge computing has pushed the processing power to the edge of the organization, pushed it out into the field. And now you've got all these super smart instruments throughout the world and not just at headquarters. And it's revolutionizing those industries. And I see this as sort of the marketing and the sales parallel of that. It's like pushing the brand and pushing the intelligence to the edge of the firm, and not treating your 500 or your 5,000 people as blunt instruments out in the field, but empowering and enabling them to really shine. And just like edge computing is revolutionizing old industries, I think that this sort of idea of brand living at the edge, living in your people, is in the very early days of revolutionizing the way we think about marketing, the way we think about sales, the way we think about culture, lots of other things.
Yeah. Well, I'm fully on board with that. I mean, I think that's how brand works when it works best. All the touch points matter, and especially your people. So they're all going to have lives and personal brands. They're all going to be out there doing things. The more they feel passionate about what you do and want to share it and want to talk about it and build a relationship, the better off you are.
Absolutely. And it's a terrible look when you're stuck in that phase 3 and you're like, hey, like, we activated our people. Great. Yeah. And I'm connected to, 12 people in your company. And I just saw all 12 of them share that exact same thing on the same day with the same boilerplate introductory comments that someone in marketing wrote. It's the least authentic thing imaginable. And it does not make me think well of your company compared to if I saw a number of your people showing up in their own ways. And I mean, even if they're promoting the same thing, like, sometimes people take what I say to an extreme and like, Steve says we should never talk about our company, or Steve says we should never promote. No, I don't say that at all. I mean, my company, Seismic, we just had a huge customer event last week in San Diego. We had like 1,000 of our customers and partners and some of our staff there. And we were promoting it on LinkedIn, but most of us were not promoting it in robotic ways. We were promoting it with our own voice. And we weren't just resharing something that marketing wrote. We were sharing our own photos. We were sharing our own little write-ups of what we thought was valuable. And even if we were sharing a piece of corporate content, like, marketing did a day 1 wrap up and a day 2 wrap up, great. But we shared it with our own voice and said, like, I loved, what I loved most about day 1 was this and that. And, oh yeah, here's the blog if you want to see the rest of it. And just that little bit of a difference makes it so much more authentic.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's coming from the heart instead of you're handcuffed to your desk, like, good for you. I mean, that's the way, I think that's what works, and I applaud that. So I think people get really impatient with results on LinkedIn because it can be difficult to measure sometimes, and it can be a little bit slower than everyone would like. So can you talk about that a little bit? How do you level set those expectations when you're working with clients or giving talks on this?
Yeah, you're so right about that. And first thing is face that head on. And I have that conversation very often with customers and prospects. It's like, this is not a magic wand. This is not a switch we're going to flip. Right? It's like, we can't just like you can't make a post go viral. You can't make a employee advocacy program or a social selling program make it suddenly work. It is a journey. It's not an event. So the very first thing we need to do is take a little bit of a step back and recognize that when you're building something important, it is going to take time and it's going to take consistent effort. That is critical. But then the next thing is, okay, but how long is this going to take and how do I measure it along the way? And I'm like, yes, okay, once we've had our table setting conversation about long term, okay, now, and what I like to say is that there's kind of 3 stages of impact of this kind of thing that a firm's going to work for. First, in the first months, you just got to focus on program metrics, like just getting your people doing this stuff, right? I think about basketball, right? You're a new basketball coach. You want to coach this team. You want them to win a championship. You want them to play this incredible 2-way strategic game, but they don't know how to dribble the ball. They don't know how to shoot the ball. They don't know how to pass the ball. And you're going to come in and start talking about, our strategy to win the championship. Like, you got to step back and help them learn the fundamentals first. So in the first few months of working with a client, working with a team of sellers, I focus on program metrics. Like, are we improving our profiles? Are we sharing content? Are we are we reaching out to people and growing our networks? Like, you can't take any of that stuff to the bank, but it's essential foundation. So program metrics in the early months. Then you can start evolving into marketing metrics, right? Are we driving more people to the website? Are we seeing more consumption of our content? Are we getting more registrants to those webinars? And all those things I was kind of bad mouthing. But again, this is the nuance of it. I'm not saying that those things don't matter. I'm saying that they're not the only thing that matter. So the market earned media value is another thing. We work with some of our especially our largest customers who are out there spending a lot of money on sponsored updates and other advertising on social networks. They know how expensive it is. I mean, $10 or $15 a click on sponsored updates on LinkedIn is not uncommon. Well, what if we could generate thousands and thousands of those clicks for free? There's a real value there, right? So we go from program metrics, kind of like getting in the game. We move into marketing metrics where it's like, okay, now we start attaching some dollars and some more tangible metrics to things. But the end game is revenue metrics, revenue outcomes, right? We want your sellers to sell more, sell bigger, sell faster. We want your customers to feel greater affinity to you such that they retain and expand. We want to see more advocacy and referrals. Like, these are the end game metrics. These are the real payoffs that we're working towards. But if we understand that those things don't happen, I think what happens is people want that. They want that in month 1 or month 2.
Yeah, they don't want to do all the stuff leading up to it.
Exactly. And it never, ever works. So if you look at it as a staged, a growth, a journey with real stages to that journey, that tends to be, in my experience, the best way of maximizing your chance of actually getting to the promised land, because just trying to force it into existence in the opening months isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and it takes patience because it's long tail. It's long tail marketing, it's relationship building, but it has a higher value because it also creates really great brand awareness and loyalty, as you move forward. I had Callie Schweitzer, who's the head of the creators program at LinkedIn, on the podcast. And she talks about how LinkedIn is the platform of generosity. And I love that because it almost feels counterintuitive. People want these revenue metrics. And then you tell them, well, the way you get there is by being generous. And, it doesn't maybe compute because, like we said earlier, it's not the old way of doing it.
No, I like that perspective. I often say that you do best when you think about LinkedIn as a conversation. I think it's a similar mindset to what she's saying is that think about your offline life, your relationships and your conversations. If you've got a neighbor who always brags and always talks about himself, you start to avoid that guy. You see him out in the front and you close the blinds. I'm not going to go. I don't want to deal with that guy. Or if you've got someone who every time they phone you, it's just to talk about themselves, or they always want something. Do you answer that call? After the first few times, you're surprisingly never available to answer that call, right? And people know this. We don't barge into conferences and just pitch ourselves and hand out business cards to strangers. Like, we understand all of these things. We understand how humans work, and we understand how relationships work. We understand how reputation is built and how reputation is destroyed. We all understand this stuff. And then we get on LinkedIn and we forget all of it. All of it. It's gone. And we just start pitch slapping. We start relentlessly promoting. We never support others. So yeah, it's crazy. And so I completely agree that when you really start to give it away, when you show up with an honest intent to share, to help, to educate, to inspire, to support others, you get it back in spades. And the fact that so few people are doing it well and doing it consistently means the bar is pretty low.
It's pretty crazy.
It's not that hard.
It's not hard. And everything you just said is everything I believe about business in general. I mean, if you show up and all you have is your agenda in mind and what you want to get, you're going to fail 9 times out of 10. Like, when you have other people's interests in mind and you're truly trying to help them, there's a ton of success that's going to come your way.
And most people know that. So why do they get it so right? That's the $1,000,000 question. Why do they get it so right offline and they get it so wrong online?
I think it kind of comes down to that business thing where, this old mindset used to be when you went to business, when you went into a business situation, you set your personal life aside. It didn't have anything to do with doing business. So we get in these situations that are supposedly business and we forget to be human. And I just think it's amazing how quickly people forget it.
And there are people who do get it right on a daily basis on other channels. And they have this blind spot when they get on social. They just go into advertising robot mode. And that's why I always, always, always start every conversation, every new deployment with a client, everything, always start with mindsets. People want to rush into, show me the tool, right? Show me what buttons to click, and it's like, no. Let's start. We have to start up here. We have to start with the mindset, because there is no tool and there are no tactics and there are no playbooks that are going to work well for you if your mindset is fundamentally selfish and if your mindset is fundamentally about taking and not giving. And conversely, when you help people and you help entire teams to reset that mindset, everything else starts to fall into place really nicely.
Hallelujah, man. That is such a great perspective. One of the things that I think you do really well, and all the people I admire on LinkedIn, is that they like other people's posts and they comment and they share. And there are so many people who just lurk and they're so afraid to just hit a like button. It costs you nothing. Like, why? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. If you fully lurk, like you don't post, I think that's perfectly valid. And frankly, a lot of senior executives, they are full on lurkers. And I have to always remind salespeople, because people will say, "Oh, my customers aren't on LinkedIn." It's like, how do you know? Right? There's a whole lot. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, "Steve, I love your posts. I've been watching you. I've been sharing your posts with my team," or whatever. And I'm thinking, I have never, ever seen that person engage. And that is their prerogative. It comes back to you don't get to gatekeep. I don't get to gatekeep how to do it, right? There are a lot of people who just full on lurk, and that's fine. And we should remember that that's why we can't always measure everything. We can't measure the impact of what we're doing all the way, because I don't know who's lurking. So I think that's valid. I think at the other end of the spectrum, you could be like you and me. We share content. We engage with other people. That's also valid too. Where it gets bad is the people who try to sit in the middle. They post and ghost, right? They post content. They really want other people to engage with them, but they never pay back the favor. They never pay it forward. They don't support other people. They don't build reciprocity. They just sit back and grumble. How come nobody ever likes my posts? How come nobody ever comments on my posts? It's like, well, you know what? You're never there for me. Why would you expect me to be there for you? So those are the people who aggravate me. I fully respect the lurkers for whatever reason, and I fully respect the creators and the engagers. It's the people who kind of want to, sit in the middle and again, let's talk mindsets. It's a selfish mindset, that one in the middle, right? I want you to support me, but I'm not going to support you. It's a selfish mindset.
Yeah, I've had the exact same experience you have, where someone uses LinkedIn to learn and they watch and they don't interact for whatever reason. Maybe they don't feel comfortable, maybe a million reasons. I never resent that, because I've had people hire me because they saw content or they got curious, they want to talk. And I think that's a totally valid way to use LinkedIn. When you're just using it as a place to learn and maybe you don't feel comfortable adding to the conversation, or it doesn't work for you for whatever business reason or the position you're in or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think that's fascinating. But yeah, I find that there's a lot of great opportunity for relationship by engaging and talking with other people around their posts. It's sort of there's the in-person networking and then there's digital networking. And, how do you combine those? Because I think there's For a while during the pandemic, we couldn't do the in-person, so the digital sort of exploded. But talk to me a little bit about the combination and how you do that.
It's the magical 1 + 1 = 3 = 5 kind of thing. And I've been living it now that in-person events are coming back. I am reaping what I've been sowing for recent years. It's amazing. Like, I'm walking through events and people are stopping me and saying, Steve, I'm so glad to meet you. They're shaking my hand. They're hugging me. They're saying, so in some cases, there are people who have been actively engaging with me, and I'm just as excited to meet them. Other times, there are people who've been lurking and reading. I don't know who they are at all, but they're excited to meet me. And now, you know what we've done? We've just leapfrogged several stages of getting to know someone, and it's a wonderful thing. I am, I think it's a false dichotomy to say people are introverts or extroverts, because I know that I'm weirdly in the middle. You listen to me now and you'd say, oh, this guy's a total extrovert. And in the right situation, I am. But in other situations, I'm shy and awkward. And if you picture a room full of people, like at a conference or something like that, if I don't know anybody and nobody knows me, I feel awkward about walking up to strangers, introducing myself, trying to start a conversation, not knowing if they want a conversation or not, and it gets into your own head. I'm awkward with that. So I absolutely love it when people start the conversation with me. When people say, Steve, great to meet you. It's like, yes, now I'm in my element. And now I become not at all shy or awkward, and I'm right into the conversation. I love it. It makes it really easy for me to thrive. And by being good on LinkedIn, that happens to me all the time. And some of my coworkers are like, they're watching, they're commenting, and goes like, how come every time I walk through this room with Steve, he gets stopped like 5 times and nobody's ever stopping me? It's like, well, what are you doing on LinkedIn, right? So to your question, how does the digital and the in-person work together? I think incredibly well. And I've just come from several live events recently where I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of really great conversations that started with someone saying, Steve, I love your LinkedIn posts. And if ever I had any doubts, I don't now. I'll never stop now.
I mean, I'll say this to the audience: like, if you don't follow Steve on LinkedIn, go find him and follow him. His content is great. I mean, I have such a blast following you. Whether I'm commenting that day or I'm lurking or I see it in passing, I always enjoy it. Like, you have such a good personal perspective on things, and it's positive and educational, and there's just a ton of value in what you do.
Well, I do try to practice what I preach.
Yeah,
right?
well, you do a good job.
I wouldn't have much credibility
right.
standing here and talking about, you got to give it away.
Yeah.
You got,
and you have like
if I
one
didn't do
post.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I truly, my mindset is sincere. I am truly trying to be educational, inspirational, and helpful to others. But it does come back to me. It comes back to me personally, and it comes back to my company.
That's
it
so
drives
cool.
high intent inbound. It accelerates sales cycles. It gets me invited onto podcasts like yours and to conference speaking things that in turn help my career and help my company. So it's not, I think this, people seem to want things to be black and white, right?
Yeah, right.
Like,
they do.
Are you giving or are you taking? Are you, is it altruistic or is it not? Well, it's both. Like, it is altruistic to a point, but it's also self-serving to a point, and that's okay. I don't think that's a conflict. If I can be interesting and valuable and relevant and educational to others, and I can benefit, and my company can benefit, how is that not a really good thing?
That's such a win-win. It's a great way to look at it. And that is really what happens. You're putting out a lot of positive energy. You're helping other people. They want to help you. They want to get to know you. I mean, that's kind of the essence of marketing. and certainly the essence of sales.
It's not just awareness. People think like, oh, it's awareness. No, no, no. It's like there's lots of companies and lots of people. I'm aware they exist, but it doesn't mean anything because I have no affinity for them. I have no desire to buy from them or do business with them or work for them or refer my friends to them. It's not about awareness. It's not about, hey, I exist. It's about creating affinity, right? It's about earning your way into hearts and minds in positive ways.
So, what would you call this season of your life right now? Because you've got a lot going on. You're doing a lot of things. What would you name this season of your life?
Wow. I've never thought about that because, well, it's interesting. If you look at, if you look at my age and how many more years that I intend to work before I like sail off into the sunset somewhere, you'd say, oh, you're in the autumn, right? But if I think about my excitement about what I'm doing and doing new things and learning new things every day, then I'm very much in the spring of my life. I'm learning so much every day and I'm doing new things every day. And I'm like super pumped about it.
Age, I think, is irrelevant, and you are in the spring, man. I mean, you are probably one of the most engaged, passionate people I've talked to in a long time. And I don't know if you follow Gary Vee. I'm a big fan of Gary Vee, and he talks about that a lot. Is like how much time you have or how much time you have behind you in your career is irrelevant. What are you doing today, and how engaged are you? And I think you're so passionate about what you do, man. I think you're inspiring to everyone, regardless of age or where they are in their career.
It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with mindset. Do you have a growth mindset? Are you hungry to learn? Are you hungry to grow? And that the answer to that can be yes or no at any age and at any stage of your career.
What's next for you? You got any cool projects coming up with Seismic or anything big going on that you want to talk about?
So in terms of what I am excited about over the next few years, it's just more of the same because there's a lot of headroom, let's just say, for the growth of live social and for the changing mindsets of social. So yeah, I have no desire to go anywhere or do anything different right now. Just I want to do what I'm doing now and I want to keep doing it better.
Yeah, you're so passionate about it. They found the perfect person to expand that because you're absolutely perfectly suited for that. I think it's great when I meet people who are in positions that fits them so well. So good for you.
I know I'm lucky.
Yeah.
I know I'm lucky that my personal passions and my job actually align so beautifully. So I'm aware every day of how lucky I am.
So 2 last questions. One sentence to finish. If you weren't in sales and you weren't doing social media, what would you do? What would you be doing?
I would probably be a writer. I think that writing and speaking would probably, write the book and then go on the book tour would be a highly satisfactory thing for me to do. And frankly, if I was independently wealthy, I'd probably just be traveling the world and soaking up new experiences in faraway lands.
That's a great ambition. I love that. And so last question, if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Start showing up and speaking up and being confident in my views and my perspectives sooner. I spent early times in my career, as many people do, trying to fit inside the box, trying to fulfill roles as those above me wanted it to be fulfilled and probably not pushing back in the right ways at the right times, which is hard. It was hard, and I forgive myself for that, and I forgive others for that too, because it's hard to do that. Kind of to tie it back to what we're talking about now, it's hard to push back on the box that an employer puts you in if you have no outside reputation, you have no outside network, you haven't road tested your different perspectives and beliefs in front of an audience and people who will push back on you, and you're just kind of like, you got nothing to back you up. You're just saying to your boss, nah, I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think we should do it like this instead. You don't have much credibility. Now the time has never been better than it is now. You could be a young seller, a young marketer, a young engineer, a young anything. You can get out there on LinkedIn and on other platforms, and you can accelerate your learning. You can build your own reputation. You can build your network. You can float lots of trial balloons and do lots of things and see what works and what doesn't work. And that gives you both the confidence and the credibility to be more assertive in your own role and in your own world. So I kind of wish that I had all the things I'm doing now. I kind of wish I did earlier, but then to some extent it was a lot harder to do then. You didn't have LinkedIn's been around for 19 years, but really it's only been maybe the last 5 or 6 that people have used it like what we're talking about today. Long answer to a short question. I would start standing up and speaking up for a strong point of view sooner and perhaps more effectively.
Great answer. I mean, I think that's so encouraging to so many people listening. And I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Thank you, Steve. I've really enjoyed this. And,
good, man.
I hope that your listeners and your viewers enjoy it as well.
Want to hear more inspiring stories? Subscribe on your preferred podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you like what we're doing, please rate, review, and share. It's the best way to support us. Thank you for listening to Brand Story.